Today, I'm going to be building a gaming PC for right around $250. If you're wondering how this is even possible, you can check out my last video where I turned a $35 desktop into a pretty decent gaming PC. But basically, I'm going to be upgrading that last build, changing the RAM, power supply, CPU cooler, graphics card, and even doing a full case swap. To start it all off, I purchased this Inland X1 from Micro Center for about $50. The nice thing about these cases is they come with 4 pre-installed fans, so you won't have to worry about buying any. The case itself is surprisingly light, which really isn't a good sign, but you can't expect too much from a case at that price. Realistically, you can go with something a lot nicer if you spent another $20 to $30. But as you can see, this isn't a bad looking case at all, and it even has a tempered glass front panel rather than the ugly acrylic. It's also important to note that the case fans are non-addressable and it just has one set of colors, and you'll see what I mean by this later in the video. The form factor is ATX mid-tower, meaning it'll fit just about any part you throw at it. The case seems to have all the necessary connectors for this build, however I have to keep in mind that I'm going to be swapping straight from the HP Envy desktop motherboard, which may show some compatibility issues. But just in case I did buy a backup motherboard, but I am hoping this one works to keep this build even more budget friendly. Here are the fan connectors I was talking about, and as you can see there are the ones that connect straight to the power supply, so there is really no way to change the color. In my opinion, the fan colors do look alright, but if you have other RGB in the PC, you won't be able to link it. Let's start by removing everything from the HP Envy desktop so we can move it all into the new case. This is a PC that I built off in my last video, and it was one that I picked up on Nextdoor for $35. The main changes I made to this in my last build were changing from a hard drive to a 500GB SSD and installing the RX 580 8GB. Here are some of the general specs for that last build. Now that everything is out, let's move it over and just hope everything is compatible. Also, I didn't like the look of the stock cooler, which is why I bought this, and it was like $10 on AliExpress, but I honestly don't recommend it and you'll see why. So basically it didn't come with any screws for installation, so I was thinking that I'd have to put the old stock cooler back. But thankfully I learned that the basic motherboard screws were working. At least that's what I think. Let's just hope it didn't strip anything. I did get a little bit lazy and didn't want to go scavenging for my thermal paste tubes, so I did use a thermal paste sack, which you can see does not look right at all. So definitely don't do what I did and just go pick up a cheap tube of thermal paste. As for the installation of this thing, it really sucked. I had to bend the metal down just so that it would latch onto the mounting bracket. This is why I highly recommend spending between $20 and $30 on a decent CPU cooler. Now that we have everything set up, let's start moving all the new parts to the new case. The motherboard fit perfectly and all the motherboard risers were in the correct places. There were no risers near the bottom of the motherboard as you can see in the video, and I didn't really think it'd be too much of an issue so I didn't install any. But as you can already tell, I am cutting a lot of corners in this build. Next we have the EVGA 400 watt power supply that will be perfect for the RX 580 and the i7 6700. This is another part I pulled straight out of the HP Envy desktop. Now that we have the power supply in, it's time to plug everything in and attempt to cable manage. And just like that, everything is connected, so let's see if it boots. I really surprised myself with this one because it did boot first try. I have attempted a case swap with a factory motherboard like this in the past, and it recognized hardware changes and would not even let me use the PC, so seeing this window screen was a relief. So now it's time to connect the graphics card and see if everything works. Another thing that sucks about these cases is that you have to snap the metal piece off rather than unscrewing it. As you can see, I unscrewed the top one, but the rest of them have to be snapped off. And you really should do this before you put the motherboard in because it may scrape it. So now that we have the graphics card in, let's get it plugged in and see if it works. I was expecting a satisfying peel here, but in reality it took me 10 minutes to take off the plastic for both sides. And just as I thought this build was complete, I found this GTX 1070 on Facebook Marketplace. They had it listed for $80, but I was able to haggle it down to $70, and this will be a great step up from the RX 580. For those of you that are interested in the pricing before these next few upgrades, here's a little overview of all the previously used parts. In total, this gaming PC costed around $167 to build. The 1070 should offer way better performance, and it was only about $25 more than the previous card. However, with better performance comes more power, and after benchmarking this PC with a 400 watt power supply, the card just wasn't getting enough power. That's why I installed this 500 watt power supply that I had laying around, and it cost around $50 from Micro Center. I am aware that the white power supply does not look good with the black PC, but I did not want to buy another. Another thing to note before we get to the benchmarking is that I upgraded the RAM to 3200 MHz DDR4, and it was like $10 each for 8 GB, so I just bought 2 of them. I also purchased a Wi-Fi and Bluetooth card so you wouldn't have to use Ethernet. And surprisingly, it did pretty well for such a cheap card. With all this said, the build is actually complete now. The total after all these upgrades comes to around $257. So now let's run some games and see how this thing actually performs.
that sumbitch made it out.
I'm sure he did.
Were we sick?
No, of course not.
How do you know?
They said it's... No. Come on, people, move!
What are they running from?
Get us out of here.
I'm trying.
Oh no.
We can't stop here, Tommy.
Those people are on fire.
Keep looking at me, baby. Over there! We're gonna get out of this. I promise.
As you can tell, Fortnite was very stuttery. My guess is that it's thermal throttling because every time it reached 80 to 82 degrees, it would get pretty bad. The power draw would also drop at higher temps, so I wanted to try reapplying thermal paste to see if it helped. This was the first time I ever changed thermal paste on a graphics card, so if I did anything wrong, I'm sure I'll hear about that in the comments. In my opinion, it was running a little bit better, but it still was reaching 80 to 82 degrees, so I'm not sure, but you'll see it in the next clip. Also, one more side note, the CPU could be bottlenecking the GPU, causing this stuttering too, and that's always something to keep in mind, especially with these CPU heavy games. Overall, this was a pretty decent build, especially for around $260. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to like the video and subscribe.